If there is one thing that Call of Duty Black Ops taught me, it's that one should never trust the in-game weapon stats that are depicted on vague 1 to 10 scales. For months did I play this game, thinking that the weapon variety was fantastic, until detailed charts with hard numbers came my way, and a horrifying discovery was made. Out of the 9 SMGs that the game had to offer, 6 of them had the exact same damage, rate of fire, and range. Despite the in-game bars showing differing values for each of them, in reality, the only differences were slight variations in mag size, recoil, and firing sound. But why am I talking about Black Ops on a video about Far Cry 5? Because of shit like this. There is precious little information on what exactly these stats mean, and most of it seems to be conjecture. What exactly does 5 range mean? What am I supposed to read from the damage stat when I can't even see the health bars on the enemy? What on earth does handling represent? These are questions that I sadly cannot answer, at least not today, but after some testing, I can at the very least rank all the shotguns in Far Cry 5 based on the spread of their buckshot. I performed my tests at the counselor's office location, making sure that my character stood at the same spot directly east of the prairie fire plant and fired at the same wall. The horizontal crosshairs were aligned with the top of the plank that peeked out from behind the left barrel, while the bottom crosshair occupied the space between the chunk and the barrel on the ground. The entire clip machine was emptied, so 7 shots for most shotguns, while 6 shots were fired from the 2-shot SPS and T2. The shots were paced so as not to allow recoil to throw off the aim. There are 8 shotguns in Far Cry 5, though 3 of them are simply variations of existing ones with minor differences. We will be treating them as separate weapons, just as the game does. All of these tests were done without any attachments, but we will get into how they affect the spread later on. Here are the results, from best to worst. Now there is quite a bit of randomness in shotgun spread, but we can depict it as a roughly circular area. The SPS was consistently the most accurate, while surprisingly, the SPAS 12 wasn't that far off. The 1887 took the 3rd spot, which is interesting as it was described as an especially precise shotgun in Far Cry 3. If there is a difference between the 1887T, M133 or the M variants, then it is barely noticeable. Second to last was the M133MS, and rounding up a full circle is the other double barrel, the T2. Now, let's see how well these results correspond to the in-game weapon stats. I think it is fairly reasonable to assume that accuracy is the stat that should reflect on the buckshot spread, with a higher number equating to a tighter grouping. The SPS is depicted correctly, but the game implies that the 1887 is more accurate than the SPAS 12, which is simply not true. The rest of it though, I'd say is fairly accurate, if annoyingly vague. One thing I wanted to test was whether or not aiming down the sights had an effect on the spread. I performed the same test as before, with all shotguns, except now I aimed down the sights. As it turns out, it does actually improve the spread by a significant margin, so that is something to keep in mind when the target is just out of reach. Interestingly, in both tests, the spread was never contained within the crosshairs, meaning that you cannot rely on it to ensure all of the buckshot connects with the target unless you're within shovel range. But what about attachments? Suppressors in some games do improve the spread on shotguns, but is this also the case in Far Cry 5? If we slap one onto the M133, and to the hipfire and aim tests, it does actually look as if the spread is slightly improved. Since we are on the topic of the M13-3, as I was doing my testing, I discovered that the base variant actually has a slightly slower pumping animation than the M and the MS variants, resulting in a lower rate of fire. However, I do not know if suppressors on shotguns actually affect the effective range and damage output, and I have no idea how one can even begin to test it consistently. But what about the sights? The vague in-game stats do change with different options, so does this mean they actually have an effect? Why yes, the standard reflex sight ensured a tighter spread on the M13-3, even more so for the optical scope. And on the Ranger scope, the effect was the largest. The cool thing here is that this even occurs when not using the sight. Hipfire spread is still reduced. I used to think these modes were useless, as long-range scopes don't mesh well with the shotgun's playstyle, but there is something to consider here. But I know what you're thinking. How does an SPS perform with the Ranger scope? Like this. Oh look, the spread is actually contained within the crosshair this time around. The shotgun slugs also provide a massive increase in accuracy in exchange for a single, more powerful projectile, but note that it doesn't make the weapon pinpoint accurate. Your suppressed SPAS 12 isn't going to replace your Silence 50 caliber. And those were the shotguns of Far Cry 5, more specifically in how they compare in the accuracy department. You have my eternal gratitude for watching, and I hope you learned something useful.